YouTube. I'm going to go through my collection of books by Algernon Charles Swinburne. In the bibliography video, I showed two volumes of a bibliography of his writings. These two here, originally published privately in 1919, then reprinted in 1966. They're very comprehensive. I don't know if they're actually fully complete, because there's obviously more stuff since 1919 till now that's been written, so a complete bibliography would include all that material, secondary material, and so forth. So in actual fact, this could be turned into many volumes. We'll look at this a little closer because there's a couple that I do want to mention. Well, actually, we'll do those now. There is a collection here of, this is a small little book, poetry, Song of Italy, blue buckram. It's fairly good condition, with 1867 at the bottom of the spine there. It's published by John Camden Houghton, Piccadilly, 1867, London. As you can see there, the previous bookseller who sold this stated that it was the first edition. Sort of. According to, well, at least according to the bibliography, the first edition of this was a limited edition, and it was in green cloth. Then there was a remaindered edition that had various colors, red and blue. And then there were subsequent editions after that. But this would be the remaindered copy, and probably with trimmed pages. They do give a sizing that you can measure to see if it has been trimmed for this remaindered copy. So by the sounds of it, the text block is original, but the binding's not. And there's two here that I have of his Rondels. Now, I have a second edition, and I have a first edition. The second edition states second edition. First edition is a bit rough. It's missing a bit of the top of the spine there. However, it has an interesting inscription in it, not by Swinburne. First of all, though, we'll show you the title page. It was dedicated to Christina Rossetti, published in 1883 by Chattel Windus, Century of Rondels. Swinburne was friends with a lot of the Pre-Raphaelites, and Christina Rossetti started writing Rondels. He created the form. It's a 3-stanza, 3 lines each, same syllables for each, and there's a specific rhyming scheme and refrain that goes through it. He was vilified a lot for many of his writings. But going back to the inscription, I can't read every word here, so I'm not sure exactly, but it's by James Roberts Brown, and there is a book plate of him on the front, attached end paper, and then there's the inscription. June 1883. It says, this book was reviewed in the Times on June 6, 1883. On that day, my dear boy Edgar passed away to another life. The poem on page 36 was, I still don't know something, I think it says in extremis, and then it says, it appears almost as if my friend Algernon Swinburne had therein written my boy's epitaph. I don't know who this James Roberts Brown is. I have searched on the internet. Several come up with that name, but the dates are all wrong. It alludes to that he could have been a friend of Algernon Swinburne. I would have to do a little more research for that, which I haven't. It's probably pretty easy to find out. But there's also as if it's a bookseller's card in here mentioning all the details, and that as friend, but it says from the library of Roy Davids. Roy Davids was the book expert for Sotheby's, Christie's, one of those, and then there was a huge auction for his papers. So this could have been a book that he had. So that's all these are detailed in here, and it talks about the differences that there is between the editions, if anything was changed. Text-wise, this Song of Two Nations, it mentions that there are two manuscripts, and there's differences between the manuscripts and differences between manuscripts and the printed book. So that's where it can be very useful. Now, I have a lot of books here individually. Let's look at the set, though. First of all, it's Swinburne's poems in 6 volumes. Let's see if I can get them all up and hold them, which may be a bit difficult. I got them in the wrong order here. This might be difficult. But here is the 6 volumes of Swinburne's. Yep, it's not going to be easy if you want to slide around. 6 volumes of Swinburne's poetry. Chatto Windus publication. They are basically a reprint of all the individual books of his poetry. I have the majority of them separately, not all first editions, and we'll just go through those quickly. But yeah, this one, Swinburne's Poems, Volume 1, and it was published in 1904. So there was actually even more poetry, I think, that came out after that. So it's not complete, but it's just a beautiful set. It's a nice condition. Now, individual volumes, just pulling them out randomly, they're all pretty well Chatto Windus, and they all have this green cloth buckram with the gold around the front cover and gold lettering on the spine, and some have the symbol, the medallion of the publisher. This one's A Midsummer Holiday and Other Poems, 1884, and he's dedicated to Theodore Watts. And a lot of these are from, this appears to be a first edition, from a collector, an individual called, or the name that's in there is Simpson. T.H. Simpson, I think? We'll get to it, I'll show there. But as well, there is a bookseller sticker in many of them, and it's an Agnes and Robertson, 89 Castley Street, Sydney, opposite High School. So again, I haven't looked into this. It could be Sydney, Australia. So they've been around a little bit, and I could explain the condition. All of them are pretty good. There's rubbing to spines, but they all have this even rubbing to the top, and the cloth's a bit frayed. But this one is a play, actually, Mary Stuart, Tragedy, 1881, and it's dedicated to Victor Hugo, who he was a big fan. And I think some of these are going to be plays now. No, we're going to alternate between. I'll try to go through them as quick as possible. This one is A Channel Passage and Other Poems, 1904, dedicated to William Morris and Edward, to the memory of William Morris and Edward Burne-Jones. He was friends, as I said, with pre-Raphaelites. Swinburne was considered a decadent poem. He liked shocking people, and he wrote poems where he got in trouble with about lesbianism, cannibalism, atheism. He liked shocking, by the sounds of it, people. So here's Channel Passage. Again, it's Channel Windus with that gold border, gold spine, and the title page. And Songs of Spring Tides. And it's H. Simpson is the owner of many of these, not all of them. This is 1880, second edition. Songs of Spring Tides, as I say, second edition, 1880. And I don't see dedication to Edward John Trelawney. Here's a thin one, Songs of Two Nations. It is, I believe it's the first, this one is, 1875. I don't see any specific dedication in this one. But again, it's the same configuration. Lacrine, which is a tragedy, a play, 1887, and it's dedicated to Alice Swinburne. And The Sisters, which is another play, I believe. Yeah, it's a tragedy. I think that all his plays are tragedies. 1892, dedicated to Lady Mary Gordon, and again, same configuration as the other volumes. This one is Erechtheus, a tragedy, 1876, dedicated to his mother. Again, same configuration, same binding, Channel Windus. Marino Falerio, and it's another tragedy, 1885, dedicated to Arlio Safel, and sometimes he has a little poem with the dedication goes on for several pages. A Midsummer Holiday. It's dedicated to Theodore Watts, and that was published in 1889. That's third edition, I think. No, I didn't do these yet, I don't think. Midsummer Holiday, again, same bindings. This is Channel Windus, slightly different binding. It doesn't have the medallion of the publisher on there. This is 1896. Tale of Balin. It is a single poem, larger poem, and it's dedicated to his mother. There's the name G.H. Simpson, where a lot of these are, and it has another Agnes and Robertson thing, but this one, instead of saying across from high school, it says between King and Harriet Streets, I think it says. Again, it's a bit small type that I difficult to see in the light I have here. Astrophel and Other Poems, 1894. Channel Windus again, and it's dedicated to William Morris. And again, same gold border and gold titles on the spine. And Studies in Song, which is 1880, again, Channel Windus, and it's for the centenary of Walter Savage Landor, who he was a big fan of. This was kind of nice. I need to check this, but it looks like it could be a limited edition with these Rossetti? Rossetti medallions on the cover, and that it could be limited to 500. I'm going to have to search that out at some point. I hadn't have all these books together, so now I have them together, so I might do a little research into them and see what I'm actually missing. So that's Songs of Sunrise, 1871. Let's see here. The Poems and Ballads, first series, a new edition, 1902, to his friends, dedicated Edward Burns Jones. Okay, and I think this is the last of the poetry one. Tristram and Lyonesse and Other Poems, 1882, dedicated to his friend Theodore Watts. It's a little rougher. It's got quite a bit of wear at the top of the spine, but it's the similar configuration. And I have 3 books of nonfiction by him. This one's Miscellanies. Again, the gold square border, 1886. And he has, it just goes through notes on English poets, century of English poetry, and just other essays throughout, which are quite interesting. I haven't read them all, but I've read several of them, and this one's Essays and Studies, and it has 2, it's a 3rd edition, but it has 2 essays about Victor Hugo, and it's 1888, as I say, 3rd edition, and it's dedicated to his father. And a study of Ben Jonson, the playwright. There's 3 chapters in here, 1889, and I don't see a dedication that pops out. I don't think he dedicated this one to anyone specifically. No, I don't see that, but it looks like it first. And I've got a variety of other ones that are reprints and collections. I won't go into those because they're kind of nondescript. I have one biography of Swinburne that I read a long time ago, maybe 20 plus 30 years ago, and I picked up a copy here, but I haven't reread it. And it's just Swinburne by A Portrait of a Poet by Philip Henderson. I remember being underwhelmed by it. It's only like it's 280 pages long, so I wonder if there's a better one. It's by Routledge Keegan Paul, published in 1974, if memory serves. Yeah, 1974. And I guess Steve Donahue would be the one to ask if there is a better and more detailed biography of Swinburne. I don't know what he thinks of his poetry, but I don't think that matters. He would like a good biography regardless. Now, Swinburne, as I say, was considered a decadent, but recently there's been a steampunk series called, it's the Burton and Swinburne Mysteries or Adventures. It's set During Victorian times, it's Sir Richard Francis Burton and Algernon Charles Swinburne, and they are investigating weird stuff. I've got two of, I think these are the last two volumes. This one is The Secret of Abdul Yassedi and The Return of the Discontinued Man. I believe that is the last volume. I've read up to this one. I started this one a couple of years ago, and I, for some reason, just didn't finish it for some reason. They were rebooting the whole story, but the first one I think has to do with Spring Heel Jack, which was a popular story during the in the Penny Dreadfuls at the time, and then that sort of sets the whole story up of the steampunk aspect of everything. One last thing I wanted to speak about was Arnold Bennett. Arnold Bennett, author, most known for his books Riceman Steps, Old Wives' Tale. I've read both of those quite a while ago. Not read anything else fiction by him. He wrote like Anna of the Five Towns, I think it is. And I picked up a collection of essays called Books and Persons. And he wrote these under the pseudonym of Jacob Tonson for the New Age from 1908 to 1911. And he's got he's a wonderful writer for essays. It's just beautiful prose, or at least I find it so. If you indulge me, I'll read a little bit here. This is the point where if you want to turn off the video, that's fine. I'm finished with Swinburne in the sense of showing you my collection of his. So yeah, this is called Swinburne. It was published in 22nd of April 1909. On Good Friday night, I was out in the High Street at the crossroads where the warp and the woof of the traffic assault each other under a great glare of lamps. The shops were closed and black, except where a tobacconist kept the tobacconist bright and everlasting vigil. But above the shops, occasionally rare windows are illuminated, giving hints, dressing tables, pictures, glass globes, of intimate private lives. I don't know why such hints should always seem to me pathetic, saddening, but they do. And beneath them, through the dark defile of shutters, motor omnibuses roared and swayed and curved, too big for the street, and dwarfing it. The automobiles threaded between them, and the bicycles dared the spaces that were left. And then he goes on here, it says, as I stood watching autobus after autobus swing round in a fearful semicircle to begin a new journey, I gazed myself into a mystic comprehension of the significance of what I saw. A few yards beyond where the autobuses turned was a certain house that lighted with lighted upper windows, and in that house the greatest lyric versifier that England had ever had, and one of the great poets of the whole world and of all the ages, was dying. A name immortal, but nobody looked. Nobody seemed to care. I doubt if anyone thought of it. And then he goes on, the next day all the shops were open, and hundreds of fatigued assistants were pouring out their exhaustless patience on thousands of urgent and bright women, and flags waved on high, and the gutters were banked with yellow and white flowers, and the air was brisk, and the roadways were clean. The very vital spirit of energy seemed to have scattered the breath and life generously, so that they were intoxicated by it in the gay sunshine. He was dead then. The waving poster said it. When Tennyson died, I felt less hurt, for I had serious charges to bring against Tennyson, which impaired my affection for him. And then he goes, but there was no general grief on Saturday. Swinburne had written for 50 years and never once moved the nation, save imminently when poems and ballads came near to being burnt publicly by the hangman. And then he goes, bracket, by the nation, in quotes, I mean newspaper readers. The real nation, busy with the problem of eating, dying, and being born all in one room, has never heard of either Tennyson or Swinburne or George R. Sims. There are poems of Tennyson, of Wordsworth, even of the suspiciously recondite Browning that have entered into the general subconscious, but nothing of Swinburne's. Yeah, it says the consequence was that his fame spread out as far as undergraduates, and the tiny mob of undergraduates was the largest mob that ever worried itself about Swinburne. Their shouts showed the high water mark of his popularity. And then the Daily Mail knew, with its comparable finger on the public pulse, the Daily Mail, on the day when it announced Swinburne's death, devoted one of its placards to the performance of a lady and a dog on a wrecked liner, and another to the antics of a lunatic with a revolver. The Daily Mail knew what it was about. Do not imagine that I am trying to be sardonic about the English race and its organs. Not at all. And then he's saying, last year I was walking down Putney Hill, and I saw Swinburne for the first and last time. I could see nothing but his face and his head. I did not notice those ridiculously short trousers that Putney people invariably mentioned when mentioning Swinburne. Never have I seen a man's life more clearly written in his eyes and mouth and forehead. The face of a man who had lived with fine, austere, passionate thoughts of his own. By the heavens, it was a noble sight. I have never seen a nobler. Now I know by hearsay every crease in his trousers, but nobody had told me that his face was a vision that would never fade from my memory. And nobody, I found afterwards by inquiry, had noticed anything particular about his face. I don't mind either for Swinburne or for Putney. I reflect that if Putney ignored Swinburne, he ignored Putney. His greatest poem was written in honor of a poet whom all English Vigilance Society would have crucified. Sane critics would naturally observe in their quaint manner that an Anactoria had similar feats, but so unnecessary were true. Sorry, there was another part here I should have read earlier. It says, what does annoy me is that critics who know better are pandering to the national hypocrisy after his death. In a dozen columns, he has been sped into the unknown as a great Victorian. Miserable dishonesty. Nobody was ever less Victorian than Swinburne. And then when these critics have to skate over the poems and ballads episode, thin cracking ice, how they repeat delicately the word sensuous, out with it, tailorish and craven minds, and say sensual, for sensual the book is. And again, that's Arnold Bennett. I found that very touching and just well written, and there's just a dozen or more in here that are just fabulous essays on a similar types of subject or book collecting. Anyway, that's it for Swinburne. This was the second try to do it because it stopped at about 30 minutes, and I think that's where I'm going to stop now. I don't know if anybody else out there is a Swinburne fan. Do they still people still read Swinburne? I do, and as I say, I bought these because it was some of it was piecemeal, but it was a big collection. And I'm working my way through, and I'd like to get a lot more and expand my collection of Swinburne. I'd love to hear from you, other poets that you think are great, and I'd love to see some of your books. Take care, BookTube. Bye.